In 1978, China was one of the poorest countries on Earth. Today, it's the world's second largest economy. What happened in between wasn't a miracle. It was a deal. And like most deals that sound too good to be true, this one came with terms that were written in very small print. Here's what actually happened. After Mao died, China was broke. Not struggling broke, catastrophically broke. The average Chinese citizen earned less than $200 a year. 90% of the population lived in extreme poverty. The economy had been ravaged by decades of communist experimentation, mass starvation, and political chaos. And the new leader, Deng Xiaoping, faced a simple choice: reform or collapse. So Deng made an offer to the rest of the world. China would open its doors. It would provide land, labor, and infrastructure. In return, foreign companies would bring capital, technology, and expertise. The pitch was elegant. Western corporations got access to the largest untapped labor force in human history. China got the blueprint for industrialization without having to invent it from scratch. This wasn't capitalism, and it wasn't communism. It was something else entirely, a controlled experiment. The Communist Party would maintain absolute political power, but it would allow economic freedom within carefully drawn boundaries. Special economic zones were created along the coast. Foreign investment poured in, factories sprouted overnight, and millions of rural workers migrated to cities to work for wages that seemed impossibly low by Western standards, but were transformative by Chinese ones. The results were staggering. Between 1978 and 2020, China's GDP grew by an average of 9% per year. Over 800 million people were lifted out of poverty. It was the fastest sustained economic expansion in recorded history. Cities like Shenzhen went from fishing villages to megacities in a single generation. Infrastructure projects that would take decades in democracies were completed in years. China became the factory of the world. But here's where the deal gets interesting, because it wasn't just about cheap labor. China wasn't content to remain an assembly line forever. The terms included something else, a quiet requirement. If you wanted access to China's market, you had to share your technology. Sometimes this was explicit. Joint ventures were mandatory in key sectors. Foreign companies had to partner with Chinese firms and transfer technical knowledge as the price of entry. Other times, it was more subtle. Intellectual property protections were weak. Enforcement was selective. And over time, the technology that built China's growth stopped being foreign. Today, Chinese companies don't just assemble iPhones. They design chips, build electric vehicles, and dominate supply chains in batteries, solar panels, and 5G infrastructure. The student became the competitor. And the deal that seemed so advantageous to the West now looks a lot more complicated. But there's another side to this. The side China doesn't advertise. Because the deal required something from the Chinese people too. They got prosperity, but they didn't get a voice. Economic freedom came without political freedom. The Communist Party's grip on power never loosened. Dissent is surveilled, media is controlled, and the same state capacity that built high-speed rail and gleaming skylines also built the most sophisticated surveillance apparatus in human history. The bargain was clear. Trade your rights for growth. Accept the system, and the system will make you richer. For decades, it worked. As long as incomes rose, stability held. But growth is slowing now. The population is aging, debt has ballooned, and the same model that delivered the fastest escape from poverty in history is now showing cracks. Youth unemployment is spiking. The real estate sector, which accounts for nearly a third of the economy, is collapsing. Local governments are drowning in hidden debt, and the tech crackdown that began in 2021 signaled something new. Beijing is willing to sacrifice growth to maintain control. The deal is changing, and no one's sure what the new terms are. There's a question economists have been asking for years. Can you have long-term growth without political openness? Can innovation thrive under authoritarianism? For a while, China seemed to prove the answer was yes, but proving it once doesn't mean proving it forever. The deal China made wasn't just about economics, it was a bet that you could engineer prosperity from the top down, that you could skip the messy parts of development, that control and growth were compatible indefinitely. Maybe that bet still pays off, or maybe the bill is just now coming due. Because the uncomfortable truth is this: China didn't escape poverty through magic, it escaped through leverage. And leverage works both ways.